Writing from first-person perspective means writing from the point of view of a character within the story. The action of the story is very close to the narrator as they're describing it, which can add a poignancy and urgency to a story that might feel more distant if told from another perspective, such as third person. First person can become a highly immersive perspective to tell a story from. The narrator becomes a highly developed character that the reader relates to as they essentially share the experiences of the story. There are two types of first person. The first type of first person is first person major, in which the person telling the story is also the main character. In the last video, I talked a lot about the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games is actually a great example of first person major, since Katniss Everdeen, the narrator, is also the main character. The second type of first person is first person minor, in which the person telling the story is a secondary character. A commonly cited example of first person minor is F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. The story is told by the side character Nick Carraway as he observes the protagonist, Gatsby. Writing in first person, there are some obstacles you may face. One potential drawback is your narrator's voice might alienate or drive people away from your story. Take this narrator, for example. I woke up at around maybe 9 a.m. It took me literally forever to get dressed because I couldn't find the shoes I was looking for. You know the ones, the red bottoms, high heels. Today was a day for sexy shoes, am I right? You know, I'm totally right. Anyway, I couldn't find the shoes, so disaster. I had to settle on this pair of pumps my daddy bought me last week. Blech. I don't know about you, but the voice of this narrator would drive me batty over the course of a novel. One way to fix this is to just tell the story from a different perspective, a less annoying character maybe, or you could just tone down the voice a little bit, such as in this revised version of the previous example. I woke up at around maybe 9 a.m. It took me forever to get dressed because I couldn't find the shoes I was looking for. You know the ones, the red bottoms, high heels. Today was a day for sexy shoes, but I couldn't find them, so disaster. I had to settle on this pair of pumps my dad bought me last week. Blah. Just taking out some of the verbal tics like and anyways really helped tone down the voice of that narrator. If you have a really strong voice in mind for your narrator and you think it might wear the readers out, you can start the story off with the intense version and then tone it down for the rest, just adding those verbal tics back in to remind the reader who's telling the story. Another issue to consider when writing in first person is that you're stuck with your narrator's vocabulary and what they want to focus on. If you try to describe things in a way that feels out of character for your narrator, it could break the spell that you're trying to cast on the reader with your story. For example, the following passage doesn't make much sense coming from an 8-year-old. I woke before noon on a bright sunlit morning. My incarnadine sweater eluded me in the hectic chaos of my boudoir, so I was forced to instead consider the verdant shades of my second favorite ensemble on the day of my 8th birthday. To fix this, you can change the characteristics of your narrator to fit the story that you want to tell. Have them tell it from a distant, more mature future, or change their interests. For example, that passage made a lot more sense coming from a middle-aged English professor looking back on their childhood. Another issue you might run into is that you can't tell what's going on with the other characters in the story as you only know what the narrator knows. To get other perspectives, you might be tempted to head hop or get into the minds and thoughts of other characters that your narrator couldn't possibly know. Try to avoid doing this as it's very jarring for the reader. One way to resolve this is to tell the story from multiple people's perspectives. A good example of this would be The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. She told the story from the perspective of two people in a couple where one of them was suffering from a strange chronic illness that made him involuntarily time travel. The story is made a lot more rich by getting both characters' perspectives. Finally, if you're the type to enjoy adding twists and turns to your stories, it can be difficult to hide surprises when your narrator is in on them. So for example, if your story's narrator is a psycho killer hunting a young woman, and the twist is that the psycho is the young woman's mom, it might be hard to hide that connection. For this, you can use what's called the unreliable narrator. I'll get into this in future episodes, but what it amounts to is a narrator that will lie, obfuscate, and basically cheat the reader out of what's actually happening in the story. Sometimes this is on purpose to lie or deceive, but other times it might be because the narrator themselves doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. Either way, this allows the author to experiment more with adding twists and turns to their stories without losing the first-person perspective. Despite these hurdles, first person is probably the most accessible point of view for new writers and for readers. It's already the way that we write blog posts, social media posts, the way we talk to each other, tell stories. It's always from our I perspective. So it makes sense to start here. If you want to read more first person, I've placed a short reading list in the description below of works I think epitomize that perspective. And next time we'll talk about the rare unicorn that is second perspective. For this week's prompt, we're going to start a 3-part point of view exercise. The first part is to write a trip to the mall from the first person perspective. You can try out different things, like writing it from first person minor, first person major, or maybe trying out the Unreliable narrator if you're interested. You can post your results below or in the subreddit if you're willing to share. If you like what I do here, please like and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you next time, and remember, it doesn't have to be perfect, just about right.